Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this September 27th, 2022. Tonight we have a brand new guest and a wonderful topic. Sophia Demas is here to talk about miracles and how they have impacted her life and how you can learn how they can impact yours. We've got 2 hours with this guest, a 3-hour show, but 2 hours where she will be talking about her insights and her experiences with the phenomenon of miracles. You don't want to miss this one. Don't go away. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of season 6. We are off to a good start so far with a good stream. I'm opposed to last week's episode. I apologize so much for that. I think I needed to reset the router, but I also needed to update all the software, which I had not done. So I think that's going to greatly improve your experience tonight so that we don't run into the problem we had last week where the stream gave out. Now, understand the audio version of this broadcast almost never gives out, and there's always an opportunity for you to be able to switch over to that if at any point the simulcast on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and all of the other places that we're broadcasting right now, if for some reason the video version of this podcast goes out, you can go over to Spreaker, okay, and listen to the audio version, usually without interruption. And then once the video version's back up, I'll tell you, and you'll hear it because you'll be on the Spreaker version. So I'm going to tell you all to just make sure that you have this link ready to go. It's Spreaker.com. That's Spreaker. That's Spreaker.com. Spreaker, not speaker. Spreaker. .com and then /show/vestiges-after-dark. Okay. Or you can just go to Spreaker. It's a affiliate of iHeartRadio, and you can actually find us just by searching for Vestiges After Dark on there. And the live broadcast is there too, only in audio version. Okay. That's the one that goes out to all the all the podcasting versions of the show for iHeartRadio and iTunes and Google Play and all that good stuff. Okay. So I just wanted to let you know, in case, because last time I know I saw in the audience, a lot of people are like, what happened? What happened? Well, go over to Spreaker and find out. And if you missed part of last week's show, it was only about 10 minutes where we were out, because of, it was basically a broadband issue, it seemed, but I think it had a lot to do with the fact that the software was old, and I hadn't updated it. But you don't have to wonder anymore. Just go over to Spreaker and listen to the broadcast as it continues on until we come back up. Okay. But that almost never happens. In fact, in all these years, it's never happened to me. That was the only time that has ever occurred. So hopefully that won't occur again. Hopefully, right? So we're here with Jamie Wolf. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Good evening, everybody. I'm doing pretty well. I've got a nice little.
We got our dram tonight. So the
dram.
the liturgical libations
Father
for tonight.
Chris will appreciate this.
Yes, and Father Chris will be joining us on the second and third parts of the show tonight. But this is a gift from him when he had come out to visit us from Australia. And this is the Starward Fortis. It's basically a single malt Australian whiskey that is aged in American oak red wine barrels. It's a fantastic whiskey. And you know me, I'm almost exclusively a Scotch drinker. Occasionally I'll do rye and bourbon, but most of the time I'm drinking Scotch. And
see, I'm a rye gal.
I know you like the rye.
I love the rye.
You like the rye. Yeah, I understand that. I can understand that. And it's it's kind of, I don't know. It's got all of the richness of a Scotch, but it has a lot of the complexities that you find sometimes in bourbon. So I highly recommend it if you can find it. This was a gift from Australia, so I haven't been very successful in finding it.
Yeah, the Fortis I haven't been able to find. They have other brands under Starward that you can see, but
not
Fortis,
this one.
Fortis
Not this
I
one.
haven't seen.
Well, Father Chris, if you're listening out there, I think we might need another bottle soon because it's.
We put a pretty good hurting on it.
Yeah, it's going down. That was a good whiskey, though. Very nice gift.
Very good whiskey. Thank you.
Well, before we get started with tonight's show, I have a questions and comments from the ether, and I think it's an important one, something that I think needs some. Well, I don't pick ones that aren't important, but usually they're theological questions, and they come in from the Nicolaitan Network, and this one came in today, in fact, and it is a good question, and so I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to read my response, and then we'll maybe chat about it for a few minutes, and then get to tonight's show. So this is the question. I saw this video, and it's actually Brandon again. Brandon gives us some wonderful questions. He posts a video from YouTube that says Wandering Souls Explained by Saints and Exorcists. And I didn't watch the video, but he asked the question. I saw this video while scrolling through YouTube and thought it was interesting. I'm still a bit confused on purgatory. What about it purifies souls for heaven? And is it an actual spiritual place or more so a condition?
There you go.
And this is a question that I think comes up from time to time, so it's worth mentioning here for other people who are listening to this show. Indefinitely, they'll be able to learn a little bit about this. So this is my answer. Let me give my answer, and then we'll talk a bit about it. Theologians, this is what I wrote on the network. Theologians are divided on the issue of whether or not purgatory is an actual location or merely a spiritual condition. My personal evaluation of purgatory is that it is a condition that we ourselves become via energetic alignment. Any physical manifestation of this condition arises because of us, not because it inherently exists as a location within the cosmos, spiritual or otherwise. As for how it purifies us, it accomplishes this through suffering. Nothing imperfect may enter the kingdom of heaven, as this would create another fall. But few die in a state of perfect grace, so what must be done with those who are saved, but still imperfect? They must be made perfect, as the Heavenly Father is perfect, to use Jesus' own words. It is really that simple. People make too much out of purgatory. That's what I said. Now, purgatory is one of those things that is really so insignificant that the Orthodox Church doesn't even really deal with it. They pray for the dead, just like the Catholics do, but they don't define these things in these kind of particular ways. The Roman Catholic Church, however, likes to define everything. And the Nicolaitan Church tends to be somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. So yeah, we deal with purgatory, we talk about purgatory, but it's important to understand it from this vantage point. So as far as the theologians of the Catholic faith go, they've never decided whether or not it's a place or a condition. In my experience, it's a condition. Okay, it's something that arises out of our lack of readiness, if you will, which is a void of grace that needs to be filled. And that takes time necessarily. I think time is kind of relative thing when you're talking about spirituality, but for lack of a better way of explaining it, that's kind of how it works. And as far as the purification aspect, well, it makes sense, because if the entire purpose of salvation from a Christian vantage point is to correct the fallen universe, you couldn't bring imperfect creatures into the new heaven and the new earth, could you? Because then you'd create a fall all over again. And so that would mean anything going into the kingdom of heaven, once it is firmly established as the permanent condition that, things like the book of Revelation talk about, once that has been firmly established, then what ends up happening is you have now created the necessity that anything going in there has to be perfect as well. So there's a lot of people who will be saved, but not necessarily are ready for perfection. Just because you're saved doesn't mean you're perfect, right? You might be saved right now, but it doesn't mean you're perfect right now. That is a process. And what if you die saved, but still imperfect? That's what purgatory is that purification process. Nothing to worry about. It's not some kind of a weird extreme theology. It's kind of a philosophical inference, actually, because, why would you need to pray for the souls of the dead? We see it in Maccabees. We see implications in other places in Scripture. But the fact of the matter is there's ancient Jewish tradition that says we prayed for the dead. And the church adopted that. And for the first 1,500 years of Christianity, it continued to do that, which was a very important part of the church's role. But think about it. Why would you need to pray for the dead? Those that are in heaven don't need your prayers. They're already there. And those that are in hell can't be saved by your prayers. They're done. They're finished. So if you still have the need by Judeo-Christian tradition to pray for the souls that have died, then that would mean that there has to be some intermediary condition that needs to be contended with. And that's where it comes from. Whether you personally, as a Christian, believe in this is not really relevant to the discussion today. It was just a question that I wanted to answer, so that if you're asking what is the Catholic understanding of purgatory, there you have it. Okay. Hopefully that clarifies everything for everyone out there. I know that can sometimes be a confusing one for.
It's a good explanation.
I hope so. I hope that it makes sense. Well, we got a great show tonight. Vestiges After Dark likes to introduce new guests, and I try very hard to find ones that I think can be a good contributor to the kind of content that we have on this show. And I like to create a diversified experience, if you will. The subject of miracles is something we have never tackled on this show. It's not something that we've ever
talked
really
about it a few times with personal experiences, but never as a subject matter.
We have. And, tonight, this week, not this week, I should say this season, when I was putting together the schedule, we found a wonderful guest to talk about this. And I am very pleased to be able to introduce to all of you our guest tonight, Sophia Demas. Sophia did not want to get married, have children, or write a book. The universe, however, had other plans. In this penetrating memoir, Sophia examines the events in her life that at first seemed to be a series of coincidences, but upon further consideration were building blocks of the miraculous. The divine language of coincidence, how miracles transformed my life after I began paying attention, chronicles the extraordinary events experienced by an ordinary woman, asserting that miracles are not only possible, but far more common than we may realize. Sophia has enjoyed 3 diverse careers: a decade in architecture that included working with notable 20th century visionary Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller, running her own contour fashion business, and working as a mental health therapist in private practice. She also created Living a Fearless Life, a 12-workshop program designed to help society's most at-risk women increase their self-esteem, which was piloted by the Philadelphia prison system and implemented with groups of ex-trafficked and ex-homeless women and women in recovery. Writing a book was never on Sophia's radar, but once she realized the truth about her miracles, she knew she had to tell the world. The book is a reader's favorite 2021 Gold Award winner. And what a interesting way to start this off. Sophia, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. We're so blessed to have you with us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, absolutely. 3 careers, and we're not just talking about like somebody that's like jumping around to some menial jobs here and there. We're talking about very significant career paths. So let's talk a little bit about that. How did you go from architecture to all these things to now writing a book? You said, your book's, the title itself says, once you started paying attention. So what happened that made you start paying attention and sort of shifted the vocation of your life to this new direction?
Well, I would say that I began when I was 19. I was going through I was having 2 existential issues. Actually, I'm sure that almost every 19-year-old has them, but these 2 issues I felt were unsolvable. And I was really anxious. And then I had a dream. So it was a dream and a man. Uh-huh. And one of the issues was, my mother, I was going along with my mother's philosophy that you should be a virgin until you're married. And it wasn't sitting well with me anymore. And so I didn't know what to do. And anyway, so a dream and a man appeared. And within 4 months, very quickly, these events happened, and my 2 issues were solved, and I was transformed into someone else. And that was not lost on me. I just thought, this is so amazing that these things happened, and I have a complete change of perception. And I said thank you a lot. And I saw that more things happened to guide me, and they came in forms of coincidences. And so 15 years ago, about 15 years ago, I met up with a world famous medium. Completely bizarre way of coming together. Accident, And she told me I was going to write a book. And I argued with her because that was not in the cards. And she listened, and I said, look, I'm a people's person. I'm not going to sequester myself somewhere and write. And when I was finished, she said, word for word, she said, Spirit says when she's ready, there are many spirits here to help her and many hands on earth. And that's the way it went down. So so I was very artistic as a child. And my mother felt that if you're a woman and you're artistic, there's only one thing you can do, and that's teach. So again, I went along with this program, and my major in college was art education. And my senior year, I had this other little dream. And I don't have dreams. Some people get a lot of explanation through their dreams.
Right.
Not me.
Yeah.
Not me. So, but this was a very simple little dream. And the doorbell rang, and it was the mailman. And he hands me an envelope, and I open it up, and it's my teaching license. And I look at it and I go, I don't want to teach. And I threw it in this little blue plastic waste paper basket. I remember it. And so that day, my senior year in college, I decided that I was going to be an archaeologist. So I went to the registrar's office and changed my major. And that didn't go over very well with my parents.
Probably not. But I'm with you on the archaeology.
Yes.
So I got a scholarship to study Etruscanology in Italy. And so one of my roommates, so we would like spend the evenings talking about philosophy and smoking a lot of Gaulois cigarettes. And so one of my roommates asked me one night, he said, if you could be in the presence of anyone dead or alive for half an hour, who would it be? I have no idea who I said, and it doesn't matter. And so I said, so who would it be for you? And he says, Buckminster Fuller. And I went, I mean, I knew that he had invented the geodesic dome, but I said, of all of humanity, why him?
Mm-hmm.
And he got up and he brought me this little thin book called No Secondhand God. It's a 39-page poem. And I read this book and I was blown away. And he quickly became my hero. And I read everything I could about him. And I decided I was now going to change my major to architecture. Well, that really didn't go over. Actually, my father cut me off financially for 6 months until I proved to him, hey, all you have to do to get me to do what you don't want me to do is tell me I can't do it, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm the same way.
So,
I understand that. Yeah, it makes sense.
Anyway, I proved my success in school, and money faucet got turned on again. So while I was in architecture school, all I wanted to do was design a beautiful building, and so what I would like to foreshadow is that where I am today is a result of a process. Okay. So I just wanted to design a beautiful building. And so one day, my friend who was president of the student union came over and he said, guess who's lecturing Tuesday night? I said, Buckminster Fuller. And he said, because he knew my passion.
Yeah.
He said, would you like to accompany me to Portland? I was at the University of Oregon in Eugene, and Portland's 2 hours away. Would you like to accompany me to pick him up at the airport? Well, I mean, that's like, you know.
We assume you said yes.
And, you know, and other students were offering him $100 bills to go with him.
Right.
So it happened to be a snowstorm. So 2 hours turned into 4 hours, which meant, you know, 4 hours back. And something happened I just fell in love with him and his wife.
Yes. And
I was 23 at the time. No. 23. And we started a correspondence. And then when I graduated from architecture school, he asked me to work with him. And that's how I got to Philadelphia. And so how does that happen? And that's in the book. It chronicles how these events happened one after another to result in me working with my hero. I mean, how does that work?
And making your friends jealous at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
So, working with him, designing a beautiful building was not important to me anymore. Mm-hmm. It was the shelter crisis in the world. It was a bigger thing. But then I ended up designing biotechnology laboratories, which was as far from beauty as you could get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
challenging,
very sterile.
but far.
Yeah.
Sterile is a great word.
Yeah.
And ugly. But so I took a leave of absence, and again, these events happened where I decided I was going to go into fashion, because this was like a little dream thing I had when I was little. And I again just wanted to design beautiful clothes. But that quickly became boring, because if you put a burlap bag on a beautiful woman, I mean, she's still beautiful, right?
Right.
So I got interested in the problem figure. So the large woman, the pregnant woman. So I had two great assistants, and we produced 32 gorgeous evening gowns that we would rent out to women. And this kind of put me on the map. Like the AP picked it up, and people wanted to rent these dresses from all over America. And you can't really, you have to kind of try it on. And so, and then Saks Avenue wanted my line. And I had heard some things, and I was feeling uncomfortable. And I decided to give it up, because what I came to understand, my clients, there are some really large women that were extremely self-confident, and drop-dead gorgeous women with beautiful bodies that were not. Mm-hmm. So I thought, wait a second, it was kind of fun, putting these clothes on women and having them, just bloom. But I thought, there's something else to this. There's something that's more important than beautiful clothes. And that's when I came to understand that it was low self-esteem was the culprit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that is when I designed this program. And it was amazing to see the change of behavior in these women. And I still run into them from time to time, and they'll run over and go, "Oh, I remember what you said. And here, let me introduce you to my family, or let me tell you what just happened." And it's one of the most fulfilling things. So it was a process going from kind of the mundane to something that's a little more important in life.
It sounds a lot like, I know you use the word coincidences, but it sounds very much perfect textbook example of Carl Jung's synchronicity, and serendipity, and how serendipitous moments will converge at the right time in a person's life when they're ready to receive the message. That is, it's usually when they're ready for it, or at least at a point where they can be ready. They might miss it. It is possible to miss it. But typically speaking, if they're not ready, it won't. If they're not at least ready to receive it, at least at some level, they won't receive it. But in hindsight and retrospect, when we're looking back on our lives, then it becomes clear how each event led to something that was truly meaningful. And that's how Carl Jung defined synchronicity, as meaningful coincidences. They weren't just random events that were occurring. These were things that actually had purpose and function attached to them, that there was something greater beyond us that perhaps is outside of our traditional understanding of how the world works, that is leading towards something. And it certainly seems that way with you, Sophia. I'm seeing it already with your stories, that you start out with these you're a creator by nature, clearly. Every artist is a creator by nature, I think, and that is a godlike, a divine attribute. It really is. I find that artists sometimes struggle because there is a certain challenge to exercising one's godlike powers in the mundane world, that doesn't always receive it, or doesn't always respond to it, or support it in the way that it should, because this is a world of creation. After all, the very nature of the universe is creative and design. So you're aligning yourself to that from the very beginning, but maybe not fully aware of where it was leading you and directing you. And then these meaningful coincidences come into play, and then it starts to make sense. So what a beautiful background, and how powerful is that? That, you know, I'm sure there are so many people listening right now that wished, boy, I wish something like that would happen to me. So is it possible? Is it that they're just not paying attention, or are you special? How did it work? I mean, how do you bring, because you actually use in your biography an ordinary woman. You saw yourself this way. How did you step into the realm of the extraordinary? How can you help others to do the same?
Well, I would find myself with these so-called miracles, and I would tell people about them, and they would say, oh, these things only happen to you. Well, that was annoying to me, because I'm not a guru. I'm certainly not a saint. I'm an ordinary person. And so I just never had an explanation. And then 11 years ago, I reconnected with a childhood friend, and I told her my latest miracle, and she said, oh, these things only happen to you. And something clicked, and I kind of meditated on it. And that is when I realized that, first of all, that I had to agree that the number of miracles were just too numerous. Yeah. In fact, they were too numerous to cram into one book. So I plucked out all the ones that had to do with death. And that book is being published. And I'm really, really excited about this one, because
so this is a new one that's coming out soon?
It's coming out. Well, it's going to be issued in the spring.
Oh, wonderful. Cool. Okay. Very good.
So, I mean, really, it was just finished being edited, and I reread it, and I honestly, I can't believe that these things really happened.
Miracles and death are something I know about, Miss Sophia. So
I'm sure a lot of people do, you know. But so what I realized was the coincidence would happen, and in every miracle that I consider a miracle. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Course in Miracles. Are you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I haven't read it in a very long time. I do have the book, though, in my library.
Well, that figures big in the book.
Okay. Because
of how it kept slapping me in the face, and I refused to deal with it.
Yes.
Okay. And so that's another story. But it was in every instance that I received a miracle, because according to A Course in Miracles, the main definition of a miracle is a change of perception for the greater good. So just by changing your mind, like, for example, 40 years ago, I was for capital punishment, like kill them all, you know? And right. Now even if it was somebody, a loved one that was murdered, God forbid, I would never, ever want that.
Right.
So that was a miracle, according to the book. That's a miracle.
Right.
So I don't consider some of the events that happened to me, like spontaneous healing, I could see people saying, oh, that is a miracle for sure. But there's other things that came to me exactly when I needed it. And what I figured out is when the coincidence happened, I took action in every case. Mm-hmm. I took some sort of action, and that resulted in exactly what I needed, which I consider to be a miracle. And maybe this will explain it. I put everyone in 3 stages of spiritual awakening.
Okay.
Okay. So most people, let's just say most people, not everyone. Most people are phase one, which is from the perspective of wishful thinking. So you're wishing for something, coincidence happens, you go, oh, wow, what a coincidence. And don't take action, continue wishing. Next coincidence. Wow, what a coincidence. And you just keep wishing. And nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
Okay, so next level is the perspective of hope. So now you recognize the coincidence and you're going to take action and hope that you get what you want. The third, and because I'm not perfect, so I need people to know that. I kind of go between 2 and 3 because I'm human. Right. Is the perspective of faith, and when I'm in that level, I can have obstacle after obstacle to what I was hoping for, and it doesn't matter, because what I've come to understand is that obstacles are also put in front of you to keep you from what can harm you. So, for example, but God, you see, God is so clever, but unfortunately, he gave us free will. Okay?
It has its moments.
Yeah.
So let's say I want a red Ferrari. I really want a red Ferrari. And so can't get the loan, and then they don't have it, and then this happened, and then it's at some point you have to go, all right, I'm letting go. Oh, is a big one. I cannot tell you how many times just as soon as I let go and let God do the cooking, I got exactly what I needed. Yeah. So I want this red Ferrari. I want it. And I'm going to exercise my free will. And by golly, I get that red Ferrari and I'm driving it home and I crash and die. So maybe I should have paid attention. So the obstacles are just as important as the coincidences.
That's a very interesting way that you put it there, because one of the things that I try to teach people on a regular basis is that, let me preface it by saying that one of the deficits, I think, of the Christian faith is that it has come in recent years into this mindset that Jesus just takes care of everything and you don't really have to do much of anything at all. And I see a lot of Christians like that. And they, you got a problem. Oh, keep praying. He'll answer your prayers, But what are you actually doing through those prayers to change your situation? And a lot of times when you start to look into people's lives who are having difficulty, you find that they're not doing much of anything at all, and which is part of the reason why they're having difficulty. And then they get mad at God when their prayers don't get answered the way that they think that they should. And it's like when you come back and you ask, well, what did you do about it? Well, what part did you play in the exchange or the relationship? And they don't really have much of an answer. And then as soon as
prayed. What else did you do?
Exactly.
Well, I prayed. Well, what else did you do?
And what did you do? Yeah. And then I have to try to explain, well, this is why the church talks about there being a relationship with God. A relationship is an exchange. Go ahead. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah. This
is perfect. Yes.
Okay.
Are you? I think there
was a little bit of a lapse there
because I'm far away from the router.
It can happen. Yeah, there was a little bit of a delay.
If it gets worse, I'm going to move closer. I'll go move closer to the router.
That's fine.
But my mother would say to me, did I tell you about the drowning man? And I said, yes, mother, like 20,000 times. And she would go, well, let me tell you about the drowning man. And she would say, okay, so there's this man and he was drowning. And it was screaming, God, help me, help me. And God said, fine, I'll help you, but move your arms a little bit. So There you go. It's the God is saying, take action, do your part.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very simple. Just do your part. And also, when I pray, I'll tell you, I pray all the time. I just ask all the time. This is what I'd like, if there's one thing for your audience to take away, is just ask. And then say thank you. I say thank you all day long. Thank you. Thank you for this delicious fudge cake with the ice cream and the hot fudge. Okay, thank you. And then you just get more. And God gives it to you in such clever ways,
Yeah.
So you ask, but you ask, you can ask for what you want, but then add at the end whatever's best.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want the red Ferrari, but God,
your will be done.
Whatever's best.
Yeah. It's a good point, because we don't have the, I guess, omniscience to really always know what's best for us, or we think we want certain things, and the old adage that says, be careful what you wish for, you might just get it, is definitely a precautionary tale that I think is very relevant to people's lives, in the sense that we tend to go through our lives thinking about our existence differently than perhaps the plan that God has set for us is laid out. And we want to always be in control. And we
Our
always want
egos
to
get in the way.
The ego gets in the
all the
way.
time.
And I think that's what it really comes back to, is knowing how. And I think that's what you're getting at, Sophia, when I'm listening to what you're saying, and your methodology here for how can people open their lives up to more successfully engage these miracles, so it doesn't feel like some kind of special thing that only happens to special people. It's about suppression of that ego, preventing it from getting in the way and interfering with the process. Would you say that that's a fair assessment?
Yes, absolutely. And if you just go back to how I explained my process of going from, wanting to design a beautiful building to something for the greater good, that was my will. It was to design the beautiful building, but it's to keep an open mind. So I made these decisions. I wanted to be an architect, and then something happened, and then the next thing, and then it was going with this flow, and so in the book, I don't. My mission is not to convince anyone that this is the way you do it. My mission is just to say, here's what worked for me. These are the prayers that work, because I believe, without a trace of doubt, that this divine intelligence wants us to be happy.
Oh, I agree. I agree completely.
And we make our decisions. So like you can just be stubborn and say, no, this is what I want. And I feel that the more you align with this divine intelligence, you align, then it's just these wonderful things happen to you. And like you said in your intro, I did not want to get married. I had issues about it. And I didn't want somebody telling me what to do, because I had that fixed in my head.
Right.
I didn't want kids. I wanted to focus on my career. And of course, I didn't want to write a book. And I was successful anti-marriage until I was 45. And then that whole relationship I write about in my book, and I'm very graphic about it. Yeah. Because I discovered that my very early on in our relationship with Frank, that here's this even keel guy, and he had anger issues like rage. Like I would cross my eyes, just whatever. And it was like, he took it personally. Like he was less than, or I belittled him, and he sabotaged romantic getaways. And finally I went, bye-bye, because I can.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was staying with a friend for 6 months, and in a matter of less than 2 months, three incredible coincidences occurred. This was in 2009.
Okay.
And he hasn't had one rage episode since. I am married to my ideal companion.
Oh, that's fantastic.
How does that work?
That's fantastic.
Okay, so I
takes
had a
work.
I said I never want to see this jerk again. And look, I mean, but these were external things.
Yeah.
These were outside things that happened that are pretty unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's a keeping an open mind.
I mean, it's an important thing that, I mean, you mentioned it again. And I think the emphasis really has to do with the participation in the process, seeing that there is personal responsibility involved, and you talk about free will, and I guess, from some vantage point, because we screw it up so much and we misuse and abuse free will so much that it's almost like, was it really worth it? But I think that's also a testament to the way God respects us and loves us, is that, can you really love something that you're not willing to set free? Is it really love to control? Is it really love to order someone to do something that they might not want to do? Even if you know it's for their good, to not give them the ability to choose a different path is not true love.
Of their own free will.
Which means personal responsibility becomes paramount at that point. That's really what the fall, the whole story of Adam and Eve and original sin is about. It's about a lack of personal responsibility. This is, I think, a testament to that. So what you're talking about here is, if people want miracles in their life, if they want to have a personal relationship with God that actually leads to something that is tangible, so it doesn't feel so ethereal. And sometimes people will say to me, "I feels like I'm praying to the wind because he never answers me, and I don't know why I do it." It's like, well, okay, let's stop with that for a second. Tell me about your prayer life. Tell me exactly what you're doing. Tell me about your spiritual life. And you find that when you really break it all down, it always comes back to apathy. They're really spiritually apathetic. They're really not doing a whole lot of anything, and they're really expecting a whole lot of everything to happen. And you've set that record straight, Sophia, today. I think it's going to help a lot of audience members who might be in that boat thinking, well, why hasn't this happened to me? Well, maybe they'll stop and think and say, well, what have you done to make it happen? You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. The responsibility is on you.
It is.
I mean, you can ask all day long, but you're going to have to take some kind of effort into your own, desire. So,
now I really don't want to go into politics, but
that's fine. We deal with worse on this show.
We have whiskey and scotch, so we're good, Sophia.
I want some.
I wish I could give it to you. You'll have to come to the studio.
I was thinking about this very thing. Okay, so take, like, at the beginning of Trump's reign,
right?
You had Trump and Putin just beating their chests, man. They were just like this,
saber rattling.
Beating their, and now I look at the actions that these two men who were like this have taken on their own. Mm-hmm. And the mess that both of them have created on a grand scale.
Global, yeah.
Like, how does that work? How can you be up there with, and Putin also, at the very beginning of his career, he cared about the people and the economy and all that, but the ego takes over.
Always.
So we have these two people with the ego taking over, and just, you step back and look at what each one is dealing with. It takes your breath away. So yes, you do have responsibility to do good. And I think that my purpose, other than being happy, because frankly, I don't want to come back. I'm
with you on that one. Reincarnation is a little unsettling to me.
I I don't want to come back, you know, and that's why I got married, because I thought I have these issues, these sort of commitment issues.
Yeah.
And I thought, am I going to keep coming back and doing the same stuff? So I thought, okay, I'm going to marry this guy. And that's how it started, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, you take responsibility. But I think that aside from my mission of being happy, which I can honestly and sincerely tell you, I am sublimely happy.
Well, that's actually a rare thing for most people. So God bless you. Congratulations on that.
Oh, but I've been so lucky with my parents. Like, I had these two loving parents, and my father had his raging well, you know, maybe other people would not have found them as lovely as I do. So who knows? It's different people's perspectives, you know? But I think that my purpose is really to be truly helpful to others. I think that because I do that, that's why I'm hoping that, you know, that God will be satisfied and he won't let me come back.
Do you think that it's, you know, I mentioned the word vocation because it definitely seems as though, you know, you were exploring these different career paths and trying to figure out your life. And then it led to all of these, you know, again, synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that led to your now miraculous experience that has now set you on this path. And of course, it's done great good for you because you talk about it being, you know, making you happy. And it's taught you a lot about how the metaphysical world works and how suppression of the ego is a very powerful thing. And I mean, I'm going to tell the audience right now, just as a parenthetical, if you're wondering why good things are not happening to you, I can guarantee you it's because your ego is bigger than your personal responsibility. I can tell you that every time.
Multiple times in my life where my ego got in the way and I'm like, damn it, I want it this way. And so I ignored the red flags, the warning signals, and got it my way.
Yeah.
And then I paid twice as hard for it after that.
But you learned something from
I
it.
definitely learned something.
So,
it's a hard lesson to learn, though.
It is a hard lesson. I think people struggle with it. But
Right.
as Sophia's pointing out here, now that you've arrived at this place, now it seems to have even further evolved into now helping others to realize the same thing. So now that you're satiated by your life, Sophia, do you find that this is what it was leading to all along, so that you can help others to reach that sense of, maybe I could, dare I say, personal enlightenment, because that's what it sounds like.
I am 100% sure of that.
Mm-hmm.
That by listening, by actions, it veered me here and then it veered me there, but you said something earlier about people saying, why don't these things happen to you? So I have to tell you this little story. So I am contacted by this woman who said, your book found me on Instagram. And she scrolled past it, and then something made her go back. So there you go, take action.
Mm-hmm.
And she ordered the book, and she realized that we live, I mean, this is Instagram, like global, right?
Right.
We live 20 minutes away from each other. So she reads the book. She said it was the perfect thing to read because some of these things happen to her, and she tells her husband and her kids, and they think she's a wacko. So this kind of, she felt validated her. So she's in a book club, and they read historic novels, but they all vote to read my book. So they invited me to discuss at their discussion of my book.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And it was so lovely, and they had food and wine, and
that makes it worth a trip alone.
It sure does. We love our food around here,
and our wine,
and
yes, ma'am.
And one woman had made these, like, she had baked these cookies, and she had these 2 cookies in a cellophane with a little bow with a saying from my book in the bag, which I just thought was so thoughtful. So afterwards, people were asking questions, and so one woman said, I wish these things happened to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I prodded her or something. And then she told me that, about like, if she could tell me something positive. And she said, well, her husband had cancer. And then something happened that she saw somewhere, and she called, and this doctor cured him. Then she said that she was going through some illness, and same thing, that she told a friend said, oh, I just read this. She called, she got cured. Her son had some mental illness. Same thing with him. And I'm like, excuse me. I said, but you're getting miracle. You're explaining to me miracle after miracle. And she went, oh, wow. So here she's been experiencing these things and couldn't recognize
Couldn't see it. Yeah.
So if I could say, to people listening, to maybe just sit down and think about who you're married to. Okay. And how did you meet? And if you hadn't gone to the gym that day, okay. Or if you hadn't done this, or if you did this, and now look what happened. So maybe this is one way to start the brain
Wheels
motor
turning,
going.
Yeah. Find that connection point in your life and see what does work.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. We are talking with Sophia Demas about miracles. And when we get back here after our short break, we'll be taking your questions. Don't go away.
We fueled the flames, but we're still learning to trust, It's never enough, never enough. Burning me up, burning me up. Don't fight the fire. Too much, too fast, will burn us out. We walk the wire, love. Don't make me read your mind. I know it. Learning to trust, It's never enough, never enough. Burning me up, burning me up. I won't fall when I'm picking you up. Hold my hand, I won't be strong enough. Our love is stronger, and I'll be here. My lead, now we're taking the jump. My pride, cause I know you're the one. Our love is stronger. Baby, I know that it's stronger than yesterday. Sparks ignited. We left some space for us to breathe. My head is quiet now. I can rest in peace, cause you are more than enough, more than enough. Feeling the rush, feeling the rush. Burning in love, burning in love. Two souls united. This roaring blaze is soaring free. If you ever get tired, love, I'll sing you gently to sleep, cause you're still more than enough, more than enough. Feeling the rush, feeling the rush. Burning in love, burning in love. I won't fall when I'm picking you up. Of my hand, I won't be strong enough. Our love is stronger, and I'll be here. My lead, now we're taking the jump. My pride, cause I know you're the one. Our love is stronger. Baby, I know that it's stronger than yesterday.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. We are talking with Sophia Demas, new guests about miracles. And I see all those questions coming in the chat room, and we hope that you actually call into the show and talk directly with us if you wouldn't mind. The number to call is 347-514-7150. That's 347-514-7150. Make sure to enter PIN number 3768923 to get into the queue. And my cat, Heathcliff, has somehow managed to get into the studio. I guess the door was left open. So if you hear the meowing, don't blame me. We'll be right back. Don't go away. joining us from Australia to help with the queue and all of the questions that are coming in from the chat room is the wonderful Father Chris, who gifted us this fantastic whiskey we're drinking tonight. How are you doing tonight, or this morning for you, Father?
Yes, bless you, Father.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Kalispera, Sophia.
Yeah.
Although it's still Kalimera here. I'm pretty well. I'm home alone this week. Jen's away for the week, so. Well, I say alone. It's me and the cats, but I've banished mine to the outside. So
I wish I had done that, but he somehow managed to get his way into the studio tonight. But he's usually pretty quiet. But you never know.
Sniffing around.
If you hear some meowing,
he'd be camouflaged on the floor. So
he is camouflaged on the floor.
He kind of lines up his stripes with the woodwork. He looks like a wooden cat.
He's part chameleon.
It's pretty fascinating.
See, I've closed my blinds because my little cat will no doubt appear behind me because she likes to come in through this window.
Look, they always want attention. There's nothing wrong with a little, little photo bomb.
Yeah.
Well, you always know when a cat wants to come in because it wants to go out.
Right.
Isn't that the truth?
Right.
Isn't that the truth? Well, Father, I know that you've been in the chat for the last hour, and I saw a lot of questions coming in. Of course, when I'm hosting the show, I can't read them all. But why don't we get started with something that you saw that might be a good question for our guest tonight?
Well, we've got a great topic to get onto for a second point, but I think we'll start with a quicker question, something which you did allude to actually, Sophia. But it's from Brandon, and he said, "If this question gets answered, you can all ignore it." You kind of did get onto it, but I think it needs a bit more attention. Could the law of attraction come into play when it comes to miracles? In other words, can you attract miracles? That's the question.
Of course, but I have a problem. I have a little problem with the law of attraction because it insinuates that, that your wish is going to be manifested and that is going to be the best for you. So if my wish was not to get married, not to have, I talked about getting married and having a book, but I didn't talk about having a child, which 11 years ago, my mentor, Father Stephen, with whom I would have coffee every 2 months for 8 years until he retired. He's the closest thing to Jesus Christ on earth. He is not only a priest, but a Greek Albanian Orthodox priest, but he also opened all the covenant houses in the area in New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey, which are shelters for homeless youth. And he brings this young woman from the shelter and who was from Istanbul. And I went into judgment. I went, she doesn't look like she is homeless. Like there was this upbringing I could see. And anyway, so he brings her and, I started with, well, what brought you to the United States? And she tells me, and then I asked something else. And then she tells me, and I was like, what? And well, Father Stephen just goes, I've got to do an errand. I'll see you back here in an hour and 15 minutes. And what I heard was abuse that this young, beautiful girl had experienced at every level, every type of abuse you can think of. And she had just turned 19 that week. Well, anyway, long story short, we adopted her. So now I have this kid, right? So it's something that I didn't want. I thought I didn't want, but this has contributed to my happiness as well, And so I think that this thing like, The Secret, I don't know if you're familiar with this book turned into movie.
Oh yeah.
See, to me, it's like it's more like what your ego wants rather than what is best for you. So I would, again, wish for what you want, ask for it, but then go with the flow.
I think that's part of the struggle that I have with the New Age movement is that there's a lot of good material there. There's a lot of avant-garde spirituality that conventional religion isn't willing to get into, and I respect it for that, and I follow what they teach for that. I mean, I follow in the sense that I pay attention. Don't necessarily subscribe to or believe everything that they say, but I do, I'm part of my job, I think, is to open myself up and just pay attention to the spiritual climate of the world in the current moment in which I work. And the one thing I would say that bothers me the most about the New Age movement is it is a very egotistical religion of me.
Yeah, it's me.
It is very much that. And I struggle with a lot of it because of that. And what I like about, Sophia, your message is that, it's avant-garde in the sense that, you're willing to go above and beyond some of the convention that, I think you grew up or you practice. I'm not sure if you still practice Greek Orthodoxy, which I think is fascinating. I wonder if I want to actually ask you if some of the mystical aspects of Greek Orthodoxy has led to some of your mystical conclusions. But, I'm sure that, within the paradigm of Orthodoxy, there's limitations there. Not willing to go that far, not willing to talk about things like reincarnation always. Sometimes you'll meet someone, a priest or a monk or something that's willing to talk about it. But overall, the general religion does not. And so I think that limits us. But at the same time, people that are willing to be that avant-garde usually throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they don't want to talk about things like, letting God play a large role in your life, building a relationship with him, suppression of the ego so that can be possible. And I think the one thing I've loved so much about the last hour and talking with you, and it's been such a blessing to hear you talk about it and to share this with the audience, is that you found that middle road, just like Buddha, you found that middle road, which is wonderful. I'm sorry, Father Chris, I interrupted you, but I just wanted to say that.
No, I think because I really agree with what you said, Sophia, and you, Bishop Brian. I think because I just think about three things. I'll be very quick. Okay, yeah. What we want is not always a fully developed thought. And so for example, when I was 15, all I wanted in the world was a tattoo on my leg of the football Premier League trophy with Man United's crest on it. That's all I wanted in the world.
So which leg?
The right leg. Fortunately, by the time I reached 18, which was the age at which you had to be in Great Britain to get a tattoo, I couldn't think of anything I'd least rather have. So that's a kind of trivial example of sometimes we want things that really we don't really want. We just think we want them. Yeah. But then very quickly, there are two biblical passages that spring to my mind. One is in the book or stories, meta stories. One is in the book of Job. So Job suffers and his friends say, well, you must have done something wrong, because there's underneath all of this is this idea that we bargain with God, that we can kind of persuade God to do what we want.
Or change his mind.
Which is actually, and that's the original sin, because we're not supposed to change God's mind. He's supposed to change ours. And that's the second part of this I really want to come on to, which is when you said change your mind, because obviously you will know there is a Greek word for that in the New Testament as well. But,
of course.
So one is Job. And of course, the only answer Job gets is, God is. Because God says, were you there when I put the stars in their course? In other words, what do you know? Yeah, right. But at the same time, a great valuing of Job's humanity. God loves him. So it's not God saying, you're just a worthless, amoeba. Quite the contrary. But he's saying, I really love you, and that's why you'll never understand the depth of that love because you're not God. And then the second biblical principle is God Himself, Jesus Christ. In the garden, Father, take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours be done. And so I think not only do we trivialize God, which is bad enough when we think we can, and I'm not suggesting, by the way, that Brandon's making this argument. I'm taking this to a different place. I'm not. So Brandon, please don't feel slighted if I'm not doing that. God Himself gives us this image for that even God won't avoid difficulty, the deep injustice, the worst injustice ever done to man.
Yeah.
He takes it on. So yeah, I mean, I was just going, yes, when you're talking like that. So they're my reflections. But and to spur you on, Sophia, the Greek word I was speaking of is the word metanoia or metanoiete, change your mind, which is so often translated, and not in error, but in older translations of the Bible it says repent. John the Baptist says repent, believe good news. But actually, the Greek word is metanoia, noia, mind, meta, change. Like we get paranoia, metanoia, change your mind. Yeah. And really, the pilgrim journey is to attempt to convert our mind to the mind of Christ, which is a journey that never ends, even beyond.
And I believe that God nudges you with these coincidences.
And, there's no doubt.
And I also can tell you from experience that God is very clever and has an amazing sense of humor. But my favorite change of mind story, biblical or whatever, I don't even know where in the Bible this is or where it is, but it's when Saul became St. Paul. I mean, that is my favorite of all times. So it's like, this guy is horrible. He's an asshole, actually. And
it's one way to describe it. Yes.
It's worse than that. He's a really clever asshole.
He is a clever asshole.
You know what?
A confident asshole.
Somebody corrected me very well, and they said, but an asshole has a purpose.
Can't argue with that.
Anyway, so
you wouldn't live without one. I mean,
right.
You die, right? So that's true.
Anyway, so here's this awful person who kills people, persecutes Christians, and God says, like your energy, but you're on the wrong team. So he cleverly comes up with this getting blinded by the light, and then Saul, why are you persecuting me? I mean, and for 3 days he's blinded, and then when he comes to, he's probably terrified to death, and then he comes to, and he changes teams, and he's all in on the other side. I mean, this is what God does okay, so this is what Saul needed. I mean, like big time, right? Like fireworks, big time. I don't think I need it that badly, so I get smaller little coincidences, and the other person gets this, and so it's a constant. I feel like I feel like I have a personal relationship with this divine intelligence, and there's been a few times when I've been actually I heard or I understood words, but I would like to give other people a chance to ask questions.
Absolutely. Jamie, what's our next one?
We have one. I think we extrapolated a question from Not Sure. Hope it's okay to ask.
Yeah.
What do I do if I feel like I'm damned? He's got a lot of issues with his time during the war.
So he's a vet. He's a
combat vet.
He's a combat vet and suffered, obviously, the traumas that come with being a combat vet, which is probably beyond most people's imagination.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess, Sophia, what would you say to him who's dealing with this?
What I would say is, somehow I'm getting this feeling that guilt is involved here.
Oh, yeah.
And I think guilt is a waste of time, just a waste of time and energy. Okay. So the first thing I would say to, what's the person's name?
His screen name is Not Sure.
I did ask him, and he said that's the best thing to call him.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we can say him.
Okay, him. I would just say, forgive yourself. Okay. And okay. Here, I'd like to point out one thing that I have in the book. About 20 years ago, I went to have my lunch here in the park in Rittenhouse Square, and there were 3 benches, and one bench had a book on it. So of course I chose that bench. And this book, the title was, Who Told You You Were Born Naked? I thought that's odd. And it was written by a Trappist monk who was a student of A Course in Miracles.
Oh, interesting.
And now, you sit on a bench with a book, you're going to read that book, whether you like it or not, okay?
Yeah.
Taking action. Okay, so it was the most beautiful book on forgiveness I have ever read anything about. So I started to think about the Lord's Prayer in Greek, because Greek is my first language. And the Lord's Prayer was, the first time it was written in Greek. It was spoken in Aramaic, when
Right.
the apostle said, how do we pray? Well, this is what you say.
Right.
And I realized that forgive was not in the Lord's Prayer in Greek. So I really looked at the whole prayer, and I retranslated it, which I included in the book. So instead of forgive our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, my redefinition or retranslation is free us from our offenses as we free those who have offended us.
Oh, I like that.
So-
I really
so
like
it's-
that.
Well, because that is in the Greek.
Yeah.
It is lift God, lift my guilt as I lift the guilt of those who offended me. And so I would like to tell this person that if I could just talk to you and just tell you that what you did was the best you could at the time. And once I realized that, it has just relieved so much of my guilt. And because I did some pretty bad things growing up, and so
Well, that's a shame. I was perfect.
I was not, and still am not.
I was a little
You
terror.
told me
I mean,
I was
honestly,
a little
So, yeah.
shit, and I still am a little shit.
I was a little terror until about 15 years old. That's when I started straightening out. But I'd say from about 8 to 15.
I'm still working on it.
Aren't we all?
Sorry, Sophia, I interrupted.
We might be in a lag again.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
We can wait.
It looks like she's frozen there. Sophia, she looks frozen.
I did have. She did actually trigger me something. Oh, so you're back.
She's back.
I don't
She's
wanna,
back.
All right,
I don't want to
good.
cut you off, Sophia. So please carry on.
no. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, I was just again two quick
guys.
things. One is that in the Divine Liturgy, often in English translations of the Lord's Prayer, and I think it does get closer to what you're talking about, because it says forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, which is, I mean, I think what you described is a much fuller way of saying that. But I think you're right, because trespass, even though it rolls off my tongue because I've said it for so many years, trespass really, it makes us think about, somebody walking in our front garden, which is not quite the depth that's needed. But to go back to another Greek father, St. John Chrysostom, I've got a quote here that I think might help. Not sure. Because a lot of what happens with PTSD is it's not so much what has happened to you, although that's part of it. It's what you did, and in war you have to do terrible things, and so so I think, Sophia, you hit the nail on the head about it being about
Guilt.
self-forgiveness and guilt. And St. John Chrysostom had it. There's a great quote which is, "Be ashamed when you sin. Don't be ashamed when you repent." To repent means to have a change of heart and mind. It's not simply a feeling of sorrow, but a psycho-spiritual growth away. This is an add-on from evil and death and a turning to God's life. And to continue the quote, sin is the wound, repentance is the medicine. Sin is followed by shame, repentance is followed by boldness. Satan has overturned this order and given boldness to sin and shame to repentance.
Yes.
And I think that idea of it's an old one that, the devil says, oh, it's not so bad before you sin. And then after sin says, you are damned, and it's a lie. He's the father of lies. And sorry, carry on.
No, because it's when you forgive someone, I mean, forgiveness is such medicine, and so when you forgive, way you forgive, which is forgive and forget, because you don't have to forget, but you have to forgive.
Yeah.
So let's say you wronged me, and then I go, okay, I'll forgive you, but don't you ever forget it. Okay. Or I could say, look, we all make mistakes. Why don't we just forget about it and start with a new slate? I have just lifted the guilt. And I would like to tell this person who asked the question, you can do that with your own self. With your own self. You can say, look, we all make mistakes. We all do things because of conditions or the way in a situation that we're in. But, let's start, meaning with yourself, with a new slate. That's what I'd like to say to this person.
And forgiveness is something that, I've said this before on the show, it's remember and forgive anyway. I mean, forgetting is just amnesia. And if it's something so trivial you can forget about it, then it's really not a big deal and not anything worthy of forgiveness.
But isn't that, Father, what makes forgiveness such a powerful thing in terms of how it happens through reconciliation and sacramental action, is that God does forget it. He wipes it out as though it never was. And we can't
clean
do that.
Slate.
It's a clean slate. Yeah. And only God can do that. We can forgive, people that wrong us, but in the back of your mind, it's always there,
at you. Yeah.
and you're always cautious and you're always wondering. And sometimes it even comes back. You forgive them, and then they do something else, and then you're like, "See, I knew you were no good." God doesn't treat us like that. He doesn't work with us like that. And it's important for people who are struggling with forgiving themselves and wondering if they're damned because of this, is that God doesn't hold us to the same restrictions that we hold each other. We're a lot harder on people than God is on us, ironically.
Well,
that's for sure.
And also to help somebody who feels like they can't be possibly forgiven. And I would go so bold as to say we've all been there, not necessarily in the same, well, never in the same way for one another, but we've all been there, is to say, there's Jesus Christ on the cross, suffering for the sins of the whole world to restore mankind to his image and likeness, except for you.
Right.
Who the hell are you?
You're so special that he can't forgive you.
Yeah, you're so special. You're unforgivable. So now I wouldn't say that depends on somebody's characteristics, whether I'd say that to them or not, but for somebody who, that can jolt somebody out of their kind of.
Well, Father, it's what we were talking about on the first segment. It's another type of ego.
Right.
I mean, ego doesn't
absolutely.
only work to just like build itself up. It also works to tear itself down. We started this conversation with a brief discussion about low self-esteem. That's also the ego getting in the way. So it does both things. It builds up
the
and it tears down.
I'm the best and I am the worst.
Yeah. I am the shit and I am a piece of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the ego does. I mean,
it's true.
it's very true.
So I think that's where that's going. What's our next question? What do we got, Jamie?
We got a follow up from Not Sure.
Okay.
Could I quickly say something about
Yes,
ego?
sir.
Yeah, go right ahead. Go ahead.
I think, and I'll be corrected by Sophia because my Greek is rudimentary, shall we say. But I think the only time, or certainly the most significant time that Jesus uses the word ego eimi, I am, is at his trial. So in other words, God is the great I am. I won't say the Hebrew word, but the great I am who is. And the only time really Jesus claims that title is when he knows it will condemn him to death.
And that is significant. That is very significant. Yeah.
So, this is what St. Paul takes up in Philippians. Though he didn't count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but rather emptied himself, kenosis. So, the only time Jesus uses the word ego in the way that we might,
understand
use it today, is to completely empty himself. It's just, and that's a miracle.
Yeah, probably the most powerful miracle of all. If we can get rid of our ego, if we can put it in its place, and I mean, it serves a certain function, but it definitely gets in the way. If we can get it out of the way, that's definitely the greatest miracle of all, I think. Okay, Jamie, go ahead.
So the follow-up from Not Sure is, what about the shall not kill part, which happens a lot with military and experienced in law enforcement.
I want to take that one. It is not thou shalt not kill. It's thou shalt not commit murder. Okay, murder is not a soldier going into war and having to fulfill his duty. That is not murder. That's different. Murder is the senseless killing, usually for personal gain or some kind of personal vendetta. That is not how war works. When soldiers kill each other in battle, that is not murder. Not by the theological understanding, nor by the legal definition.
It's not actually a sin either.
No,
you're protecting each other.
Yeah.
You've got someone trying to kill you and your brothers. You're going to defend them and do what you got to do.
Correct. That it's not. People misquote that in Scripture. It is not thou shalt not kill. A lot of people do. It's thou shalt not commit murder. It's very specific. And it's a very specific type of thing.
Otherwise, you couldn't eat animals.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's not murder. Slaughtering an animal for food is not murder. Catching a fish and pulling it out of the ocean is not murder. And nor is protecting yourself. That's another thing. Let's say someone breaks into your home and a home invader and they're threatening your family, and the only thing you can do to protect yourself is to subdue that person.
He would be a dead ass, but I would pray over him.
Well, but that's but I mean, let's assume it comes to that. It is not murder. That it's self-defense. A self-defense situation where someone dies is not murder.
Right. I mean, it still sucks. It's still something that you're...
Oh, yeah, I know. It's terrible.
Right, it's something you got to live with, because we're not... But
that's the fallen world, and that's what I've referred to before on this show and also during Mass and everything else as institutional sin. We are all subject to what is known as institutional sin, which means there are certain aspects of the fallen world. In order to live, we end up having to be less than perfect just by virtue of being here. It's not because you want to be. It's not because you're making a conscious effort to be a terrible person. It's by virtue of being here. You're going to have to do things that are less than perfect. And that's what the church refers to as institutional sin. And it's very relevant because you can be can be really striving to be a wonderful person. And even the best of us is going to have to, at some point, tell a white lie. There's always going to be something that we do that is less than perfect, which is still sin, that just kind of subtracts from the potential that we could be. But in order to survive or live in the fallen universe, well, there's going to have to be sometimes fallen action. And sometimes we are faced with the lesser of two evils, whether we like it or not. That sometimes happens. Okay. Do we have another one?
That's the last one I've seen. I'm trying to catch up.
Father Chris, did you see any more for Sophia in the, I saw a lot of them, but I wasn't able to capture them earlier on in the...
I think we caught most of them.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of it's chat back and forth.
So I have a question then. Well, actually, one is a question about tonight's topic, and one is kind of just an observation that I'm kind of fascinated by. But is that wonderful piece behind you, Sophia, above your fireplace mantle, is that one of your works?
No. No.
Okay. It is
No,
a
but
beautiful
it's-
piece, though.
It's a local artist, and it's a woman in a wing chair, but to me, it's an angel.
Yeah, I can see.
I see it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see it both ways.
Yeah, it's almost like an optical illusion, almost like you see what you want to see, and it's beautiful. Yeah, I just noticed it when I was there. So getting back, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I wanted to bring it up again because I'm fascinated by the Eastern Church. It's a big part of my own spirituality. It's a big part of my tradition as a Christian. My wife was baptized in the, I know that Orthodoxy doesn't value them in the same way that the Church of Rome does, but the Eastern Catholic churches, the Uniates. My wife was baptized in a Ruthenian church, and so we.
Excuse me, what?
Ruthenian.
What?
It's called Ruthenian Catholic. It is basically.
They're the Orthodox in communion with the Pope.
It's an yes.
Oh, that's my husband was Greek Catholic.
Greek Catholic. Yeah.
Greek Catholic, and same liturgy, but the Pope.
It's the Pope. It's they follow the Roman calendar instead of the Eastern Orthodox one. But my wife was baptized in that tradition, and so I became very familiar with it, and then I became part of it in a very intimate way. So I know that the one thing that I think Catholics don't necessarily understand about Orthodoxy is just how mystical it is and how beautiful it is. I think we tend to sometimes in Catholicism define things to such a fault that it becomes sort of stale after a while. Transubstantiation is one of the examples I like to give, where, Catholics like to have a definitive way that the body and blood of Christ happens. Whereas Orthodoxy is like, why do we need to know these mysteries? We don't need to know these mysteries. We just know it happens, but we don't need to define it. And I've always found that to be a beautiful way of approaching faith. And, you use the word faith several times tonight, Sophia, and even your name is such a beautiful name. It's so relevant to you, wisdom, because you are giving us so much wisdom. And it is almost as if the archetype of wisdom has become you and you were born that way. I see that as also one of the coincidences you're talking about, one of the synchronicities that is kind of part of the message of your life. And it's not an accident. So, I think that... that mystical aspect, it has a powerful impact on the people that participate in that tradition. So did you find that Orthodoxy helped to shape your spirituality and contributed to this direction? Or did you see it the other way, perhaps? Did you see it as a barrier?
No. So my mother was one of those people who gained spirituality through her religion. So it was always like, oh, the little Virgin Mary is going to do this, and the little baby Jesus is going to do this. And so I grew up like, oh, okay, I can talk to these people. I mean, they're familiar. She made them available to me. So I think that has something to do with it. And then in college, my first philosophy class in ethics, I'm like, oh my God, you don't have to be a Christian to be a good person. that Karl Marx, there's something to his message. Oh yeah, we're all the same. And then it took, this was in the 70s. I kind of went away from the religion, and then I read this book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Living Buddha, Living Christ.
Oh, I have that book. It's one of my favorites. Yeah.
That brought me right into the fold. Okay. And so then when I started writing my book, I had this urge at the beginning to study quantum mechanics, because even though my faith is, unflappable, I just wanted to know how these external things can happen here on Earth, and it helped.
Right.
And then, so then I started to find these popular physicists like Michio Kaku, who get on YouTube and say, oh, very soon we're going to be able to bilocate and time travel and dematerialize and rematerialize. And I'm like, wait a second, the yogis have been doing this for thousands of years, you know? And then I heard
So did the Desert Fathers.
I'm sorry?
So did the Desert
Fathers, yeah.
So I heard rumors, yes. So I heard rumors that these Greek Orthodox monks did this stuff up in Mount Athos in Greece, and these Russian Orthodox monks off the coast of Alaska. And I researched, and all I could find is hearsay. It was a book called The Mountain of Silence, and it was just hearsay. And I finally, after 2 months, I just let go. Remember, let go, let God do the cooking. And I meet Mother Ameliani.
Oh, wow.
So if you go to my website, sophiademas.com, on the My Influencers page, there's a blurb about her story. So she has become a friend. Her story is a firsthand account of bilocation that will blow you away.
Wow.
So this is real. This is part, like you said, the Desert Fathers. When you reach this kind of this height, these things are palpable. And these yogis finally, after all these years, I've wanted to read Autobiography of a Yogi, and finally this year I read it, and he describes these things that his guru would do, and you're not supposed to. And like I was having like this personal relationship with Yogananda, and I would think something, and then he would answer me. So he described this sort of paranormal thing that his guru did. And I was thinking, wait a second, you're not supposed to talk about that stuff, because lest you become prideful.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So that's why you can't find any confirmations of this stuff, because it's not talked about. And then at the bottom of the page, he goes, well, I didn't tell you all the stories. There's stories that I kept to myself. So these mystical things, I think, are really available to everyone. We have to get to that dimension, whatever you want to call it.
I think the other thing I'd say, though, is that because I don't doubt these things, and I've spoken to somebody who was a first-hand witness of an Orthodox monk bilocating. A very old couple. They were in their 90s. They were amazing. Anyway, but I think what I would say is that the danger is where people say is the wager, where they say, well, if I experience or witness these miraculous, extraordinary things, then I'll believe in God. And actually, as you will know, it's always the other way around. It's always the other way around.
Yep.
These are monks that dedicate their entire lives, their sexuality, everything is sacrificed for God, and they spend the whole day and night dedicated to nourishing that faith through liturgical practice, through fasting, through all of those the great gifts of God. And that it's through that they enter this deeper experience of God. And therefore, I think the pagan worldview is the Tower of Babel. That we build ourselves up towards God. Yeah. But the way is in fact to empty yourself, to be kenotic, to empty yourself into the kind of enormity of who God is, to fill yourself with God, which is the same way as emptying yourself.
Well, you asked about the doctrine, I think, about the church. And And if you really read the doctrine of the church, it's very quantum. It is extremely quantum. We're all one. We're all one with the divine, and to the point of that we have the capacity to become as God. That we have that capacity.
Theosis. It's theosis. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Theosis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the fundamental difference. I mean, it's so like interesting. An accident of history. We have the schism in the church, not an accident, of course, but something that happens in 1054, which most people have no idea about, but actually they live the consequences of.
They do.
Yeah. So you have this great separation between East and West within what was the legacy of the Roman Empire. And in the West, we and by the way, this is not to say that one is better than the other. In fact, what we need is the reunification, because we need these things to meet again. But to paint broad brushstrokes, we have in the West a hyper rationalism. So everything becomes about we get the Thomistic tradition, all these things that I greatly value, by the way. But the very rational, scientific, all of that comes out of that Western rationalism, and then therefore we think about sin as transactional, and so that's why we get doctrines of the atonement which stress God's wrath and the satisfaction of that wrath, the blame, and that's the stress in the West in the Catholic Church, and even more so in the Protestant churches. Yeah. In the East, there's a less of the not that they're irrational, but there's been less of a focus on rationality, more of a sense on being, on ontology, and so you get this, and it's not. And again, you need both. I'm not preferencing one over the other, and that's why the stress of the atonement in the East is theosis, is that God becomes man, that man might become God. And so and therefore the Christian journey is less about how you reassign your guilt onto Jesus Christ on the cross, and more on, okay, so God became a man, now what do I do about it? It's more about, now they both actually lead in the same way. They just do it through different routes. And I, for me personally, the Western route has been more damaging, I think, for me. I'm not talking for other people.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I Mother Emeliani runs a monastery in Maryland, and I took my daughter there. And so my daughter asked her, she asked, how do you know God? How do you know God? And so Mother Emeliani says, well, she says, the Presbyterians, they know God through their head. We know God through our heart.
Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah.
And that is, I think that true. Distinguishing point.
I think that's another illustration of that. And it's why actually schism in the church is not just a shame. It's not just a pity.
Well, I think there's always a little bit of the carryover of oh, happy fault. It continues on in that even the sins that continue to perpetuate, that even those things are being used by God for a specific purpose or part of the plan of salvation. It becomes written into the soteriology. So it stands to reason.
One of my great heroes was Metropolitan Kallistos Ware, who died recently. He was one of my lecturers. I was very blessed to have known him. And yes. And he worked a lot on trying to heal the rift between East and West, because he was a Western person but an Eastern bishop, Greek bishop. And he said that, just going off what you just said, Bishop Brian, he talked about, he had a beautiful way of turning words around, which is quite Christ-like, actually. And he said, we must have an impatient patience. And I think that is perfect. That yes, in fact, the healing between East and West is something it's not trivial, and therefore it can't be entered into trivially.
Right.
So therefore we shouldn't in haste, make agreements that actually aren't real agreements.
Right.
So we have to have that kind of patience.
Right.
But we must be impatient in our patience.
Well, Sophia, we are coming up to the top of the next hour, and so I am wanting to give you an opportunity here at the end of segment 2 to kind of just talk about anything you'd like to announce coming up, or ways in which the audience may reach you. We already know your website, sophiademas.com. There's a lot of wonderful information there. And honestly, I'd like to have you back on the show after your next book comes out to just talk about that specific aspect of the miracles, that you separated for this new edition. So that would be wonderful for a future season, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, I would love to. So the title of the next book is Consciousness Beyond Death, True Stories of Signs, Messages, and Timing. So that pretty much wraps it up.
Okay.
And so if people would go onto the website and subscribe, I'm working on the audio book for the first book. And then, so they will be notified when that is on. And then they will also be notified when my book comes out in the spring. I'm also going to be putting on the website the introduction of the second book. So when you subscribe, you will get the introduction. But other than that, it's I just hope people go away feeling connected, not to this divine intelligence, because I know you're going to think I'm a heretic, but I don't believe in hell. I believe that you make hell here on earth, and you don't have to.
Well, I don't think I believe in hell in the traditional sense either. I think Father Chris would probably think I'm a heretic when I say I tend to think that hell is absolutely something of your own manifestation, of your own creation.
I do think that you put yourself there.
You put yourself there. So we all are in agreement, I think, on that. Yes. That whatever hell is, you kind of do it to yourself. God's not doing it to you. I think we can all agree on that.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, Sophia, thank you so much for being with us today. It has been delightful to have you on, and you are absolutely invited back. We will keep in touch so that when your book comes out, you said it was the beginning of 2023. Was it spring?
Spring.
Oh, she might have froze up again. Spring of 2023.
I believe so.
And we will invite you back on for probably season 7. We'll still be in the midst of season 7 at that point. Have you on and talk about that book and maybe life after death.
Thank you. I really had a wonderful time.
Us too. Thank you for coming on
with you.
Yeah, me too.
It was beautiful. Thank you. And God bless you. We'll talk soon, okay?
Have a good night.
Thank you,
ma'am.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to take our break here. We'll be taking a break here, and we'll be coming back in just a moment to talk to all of you about your questions and comments about tonight's guest, and also to discuss anything that might be on your mind in the next segment. Don't go away.
I need you closer, I want you and only
pushing my limits and all the drive that I have. Well, I'm going the distance with you. I didn't know what I had till I knew what was missing and everything that I dread. Well, I built a resistance with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll keep you off the ground. You're gone, I wish you'd stay. I could look at you for days. Time was well spent, that's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you. Take your time, not in the fast lane. I understand that you've been broken too many times, but I'll be waiting to make you lose from all you've taken. But if we listen to each other and admit our mistakes, then I can show you who I am, because I'm not the same. I'm better with you.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the third and final part of Vestiges After Dark. Tonight, we've had a fantastic discussion about miracles with our new guest, Sophia Demas. You can find out more about her work at sophiademas.com. I definitely encourage you to go check that out. We'll continue the discussion on this segment with Father Chris and Jamie Wolf are still with us and looking at more questions. I saw one in the chat room there. We'll be taking that as well. And also, if you'd like to call into the show, we'd always love hearing from our audience. 347-514-7150. That's 347-514-7150. Enter PIN number 376-8923 to get into the queue, and also free on Skype for international callers. Eye of the Seer. Just dial that up. Well, I hope the feed tonight has been much better than it was last week. I think already I've noticed a great improvement, and I do think it had everything to do with the fact that the software needed some major updating. And I'm learning these days, with updates being pushed out on an almost regular basis, if you don't keep up with them, then these programs don't work right. So I think that's what caused our crash last week and our bandwidth drop, because it actually wasn't a fluctuation at our end. It was more of the software sending the signal to the simulcaster, and that's where it went all wrong and we lost our connection. But if you notice, the audio only version was perfect and flawless. It didn't even have any buffering or anything there. And I went back and listened to both versions, and the audio was perfect, and the video version had the break where if you go back now on YouTube, you'll see that there's part 1 and part 2 with Marty and Michael Parry last week. So, but if you want to hear the whole thing, you can go listen to it on iHeartRadio. Okay, so we have some more questions from the chat room, and I think Jamie Wolf has been jotting them down. So I guess let's go and get started with that and see where it takes us for this last hour.
So we got Ghost Catcher. What do you guys think about spirit boxes and astrology and tarot card being used to find missing or murdered persons?
Well, I think that if you're dealing with a case that is unsolved and you're coming up with no leads, I don't see any reason, unless it becomes a barrier to the belief system and paradigm of the law enforcement agency, or at least the law enforcement officers that are involved. I don't see how it could hurt anything to utilize some of these tools to maybe uncover some hidden information. I know that it definitely does work, and we know that Michael and Marty Parry, our guests last week, have actually been called on by various law enforcement officials to assist with cases of unsolved murders and things like that.
Sean Austin's working the Jennifer Dulos case up in the Northeast. She's been missing for 3 years, haven't found the body, and he goes out and does spirit box sessions and has gotten some pretty compelling evidence and leads in the case.
Yeah,
it's gone cold, I think if a case has gone cold, why not?
Why not? I mean, you and Father Chris are both law enforcement, so you're probably even better equipped to answer this question than I am. But personally, from just a standard human logical point of view, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to use everything at your disposal. But Father Chris, what do you think? Do you think these things make sense?
I think it's really, because I watch a lot of the true crime stuff on which inevitably almost always from America, because obviously there's more crime in America. No, I'm joking.
Well, no, you're not really wrong there. You're not really wrong.
Well, there's a lot more people, to be fair. What strikes me is that I don't see anything particularly wrong with it. But what strikes me is that it simply would not happen in Australia or Great Britain.
And why is that? Do they just not believe in that stuff, or what?
Absolutely, yeah. It just wouldn't even.
It would be an embarrassment to the department.
Yeah, it would be considered a joke.
Right.
So Americans are more religious than.
Well,
Europeans.
it's still very very rare. Some of the bigger agencies will incorporate them as kind of a last ditch, kick in the wind. But I can tell you that my agency would never entertain it.
No, I mean, I would reflect that the law itself, I don't know what it's like in where you've worked, Jamie, but certainly in England and Wales, there are lots of laws about the way people can be questioned, how investigations take place. There's obviously legal safeguards for people who are suspected of offences.
Right.
Lots of those are set aside if you in a situation where you think someone's a hostage or has been kidnapped or is in danger of death. Mm-hmm. So some of the laws that normally apply are set aside, if you like, for desperate measures. And I see this in a similar vein. I guess the question is, can it do spiritual harm to the people using those means? I think that's the real, because hey, you throw the whole box of tricks at something to try and find someone who's missing, suspected to be at risk or death.
Right.
So I guess the real question is, do we think it can do any harm to the people that are engaged in that activity? And I guess I would say people engaged in that activity are already engaged in that activity. They're already the risk is already taken, if that makes sense. So it's not a unique risk to apply their abilities to trying to track somebody down.
Right, and it's just another tool that a detective can use, albeit a rare one. Sometimes they'll drum up something that someone may have missed prior, and then you use that old evidence. Yeah, because
that would probably
you're not going to go get a warrant on. Well, a psychic said no, but you can do a knock and talk and go do a consensual encounter with the person.
It can start a line of inquiry,
right? And it may drum up some other evidence that you didn't know about before too. I've seen it happen. So,
and by the way, I was a Christian the whole time I was in the police.
Same.
I prayed about lots of situations I was in. It's a natural instinct, and so and I believe in that. There are intractable situations where you think there's really no answer to that, or there's nothing a police officer can do to fix this situation, but any number of situations you get called to, and so you leave it to prayer.
Yeah, and that doesn't hurt. There's a second part to the question.
Okay.
From what I've heard, the family does not want to take help from spirit guides or anything of that nature because they are believers of God. But please clarify if you have time. Thank you guys so much.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's no secret that a lot of Christian churches, including the Roman Catholic Church, teach basically against the use of divination or occult means, us being one of them. Probably not so much spirit box. I'm not sure how the church would look at that, because the catechism was...
Not caught up with it.
They haven't caught up with it. The catechism was written before that came into use. My guess would be they'd probably take a harsh stance against that as well. And I think we have to always try to put it into its frame of reference. Okay, the church isn't arbitrarily just coming out there and condemning these practices. It really has more to do with the role the church exists to play, which is to lead you into a deeper, more intimate relationship with God, so to help facilitate your salvation. Tarot cards and astrology and spirit boxes are not going to aid you in your salvation. Therefore, the church is not going to see any use or value in these things, because ultimately they could get in the way, or at worst, they could be used as a replacement for trusting in God, putting trust into the tarot deck instead of what God is telling you in prayer, or maybe even leading you to focus on the deck instead of praying at all. Those are the risks that the church is trying to mitigate. Not that these are tools of the devil and, you're going to put your soul at risk by using them. More along the lines of that you're misdirecting your faith, potentially, if you're using them in such a way that it's a replacement for things that you should be going to God with. And that's really kind of, when you read the catechism, that's really what it's saying. And I agree with that. I do think that is what ends up happening in a lot of cases. I think you see that with the New Age movement. These things are being largely replaced or used as replacements for traditional spiritual practices. And that is something that to be avoided.
And that's why I think this is a different situation, because I think if you're using those sorts of practices to say, tell me what I should do with my life, shall I make this decision or not? I think the church, rightly, because I think a decent psychologist would say the same. No, that's not a good, don't ask a spirit box whether you should become a policeman.
Don't let it all hang on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's where that is.
That's some discernment.
Not only a folly, but wrong, Right. So I think it's different to say, well, look, hey, here's a tool that might help us find them. I guess the flip side of this is, and where the church, I think, would speak, is to say, well, also, so you use those means, okay, to try and find a person or whatever it might be. The demons can also speak through those means. So, you might be using it to try and find somebody before they get killed. The demons might make sure you find them once they're dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess that's the wager, but I'm with you, Jamie. If you've got absolutely nothing to go on,
it's a Hail Mary pass. It's a Hail Mary pass. Yeah.
I think it just needs to be kept in its proper perspective. I think that not to lose perspective on what these things are, and to always and honestly, being someone that has studied tarot we're going close to 30 years now on this. Perhaps, if I really do the math, it might be longer. I can tell you that the tarot is not going to work accurately or authentically if you go about it with that kind of frivolous question asking. It won't respond to that, and you're going to get basically the same answer that a deck of playing cards at a casino are going to give you when you're playing blackjack. In other words, it's going to be nothing but random gibberish.
It'll make you bankrupt.
It'll make you bankrupt, yes. In this case, spiritually bankrupt. The cards, the tarot deck is about unraveling the inner workings of your archetypal connection. And it's a type of divine communication, and until it's used in that context as a facilitation for a better relationship with God, not as a replacement, then ironically, the tarot card won't even talk to you. You're going to just be, making things up. And I think a lot of readers are doing just that, and that is, of course, one of the problems with it. Nisaba asked a question. Father Willett put out a YouTube video last week on his way to a paranormal demonic investigation. I was wondering how that went. Yes, we did. We did get back from an investigation this week. It wasn't actually quite an investigation. There was already an investigative team that had been working with this family out in the state of Alabama, and they called us in because there was some issues that had led them to be concerned. Now, all of this was documented in the documentary that is being filmed about our work. We have a producer that's been shadowing us on cases for the last couple of years. Of course, we haven't been taking many cases, so this has gone on a lot longer than it probably should have or would have otherwise. But so you'll be able to see some of this. Fortunately, it wasn't demonic, as it would have. There were certain indicators early on that lend itself to say, well, maybe we are dealing with something extreme. But after getting in there and meeting with the clients and talking with them and doing the work that I do, it fortunately was not a demonic case, which is very, very good news, because that means that now just about anything else that could be paranormally wrong with this situation is easier to resolve. You know, when you're dealing with a genuine demonic situation, sometimes people get disappointed when you tell them that there's no demon involved, and it's like, well, why are you disappointed? Didn't you want that? Isn't that good news? It's like going to the doctor because you got a lump and he's like, it's malignant, and you're disappointed when they say it's benign. I mean, do you want it to be malignant? I mean, you know, this is kind of the same thing here. And, you know, the reality is just about everything else is easier to resolve. Most of the time, it comes back to your spiritual life. What are you doing about it? How are you fostering it? Are you caring for it? Are you nurturing it? And that was kind of the case here. And so I'm not going to say too much. You can watch the documentary when it's released and see more of the details. But the case went, in my opinion, it went very well.
Family had a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
We'll just say that. And we gave them some pretty good advice. We were there most of the night. And as far as Terry asking about the glass breaking in my hands, and then there was a fire with one of the investigators, it could just be big coincidence. Well, I found it interesting that the two investigators working on the case to have us come out there, I cut my hand and his house burnt down the same night. You know, it wasn't, my hand's fine, by the way, Terry, thank you for asking. I just got a couple of deep cuts. They weren't real big, so they're healing up fine.
It is sometimes the result of a very psycho-spiritual
projection.
A psycho-spiritual projection. Mm-hmm. Okay, in cases where a person is extremely psycho-spiritually powerful, and they don't know how to control it, and they don't know what to do with it. And who are you going to go to talk about this? Your pastor is typically not going to know what to say. You know, what are you going to find? Some kind of new age guru who's going to probably just be swindling you out of money. There's not a lot of options for people that find themselves.
I just send them to Mount Athos.
That would be where you go. You know, although sometimes it's a woman, and then you're really in trouble.
Yeah, that's a woman to Mount Athos.
Only the Virgin Mother's allowed there, Father. You know.
That's right, and hens. And animals allowed as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I mean, that's kind of what we were dealing with here. So it was a very psycho-spiritually active environment, a psycho-spiritually active family, and a lot of these things that seemed like demonic coincidences or demonic signs turned out to be projections of perhaps their fear that there was a demonic entity in their lives. That can be all it takes. See, that's the danger of fear.
Trauma.
Fear produces these things. This is what makes my work so challenging and why it's difficult to teach people to do what I do, because there's so much of it that involves very careful discernment. You can't jump the gun. You can't just look at one thing or go through a questionnaire and say, oh, it meets all the criteria, it must be demonic. It does not work like that, because there's always a plethora of things that can actually mimic these actual events.
And we've seen it time and time again.
We do. We see it all the time.
Very rarely do we actually deal with a fallen angel demon. Most demons never. We create through our trauma.
Usually.
Yeah, exorcists that see demons everywhere aren't exorcists.
No.
Right.
That's why, but see, they need to, Father, because they wouldn't be successful in their business model.
By the hour.
That's right. They wouldn't be successful in their business model if they didn't see demons everywhere. Because, see, it's very easy to exorcise a demon that's not really there. You know what I mean?
You can speak the ritual.
Yeah.
You know, you can read the ritual out.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone will be very impressed, especially if you do it in Latin.
Yes.
But Badger, you mentioned the Roman Catholic Church earlier on, and I think you'd be waiting a long time for the Roman Catholic Church to condemn something like that, because I think there's two things. One is that they're far too busy condemning people for praying in Latin in church.
Right.
seems to be a very strange use of the Latin Church's time. But I think connected to it is the fact that, and by the way, I'm talking about the people ruling the church. I'm not talking about
shadow banned again.
Of course.
Yeah, and but more importantly, I think you're dealing with a hyper rationalism where I think certain leadership, it would appear, certain leadership within the Roman Catholic Church believe in socialism, not Christianity.
Yeah.
So I don't think they wouldn't condemn using spiritual things because they don't believe in them.
They don't believe in them. Do they even believe in the religion? I mean, I wonder sometimes.
I don't think so.
It doesn't seem like it.
I mean, socialism is not Christianity.
No,
absolutely not.
Lots of people get confused with this. I heard somebody on television, national television in Australia, describe herself as a Christian communist.
Yeah. They need to
choose one.
They need to pick up a history book.
It can't be both. They're kind of contradiction in terms.
But you see what they mistake, because I'm sure some of our listeners are thinking, what are you on about? Communism's a kind of expression of Christianity. No, it's not.
No, the hell it ain't.
Christianity says, yes, if you've got 2 cloaks, give one away. You do it.
You do it. You're not forced to do it.
Communism says an anonymous state will redistribute your things. There's no charity in that. No. That's theft.
It is theft. Yeah. I mean, there's no charity and there's no grace if you're not willingly giving it.
No.
It has to be an action of your own volition in order to be merited.
The caveat to that is to say, and look what happens to Christianity in communist states.
Yeah, that doesn't tend to do too well.
They don't go together.
No,
ask where China's Christians are.
Well, look at Russia. I mean, the whole time that it was a communist empire, I mean, Christianity, the Russian church, was persecuted. It's been since the fall of the Soviet Union that the Russian Orthodox Church has been able to operate like it once did, but. I mean, that's an example. Again, here you have deeply religious culture like Russia, and communism completely wiped it all out for that entire length of time. I mean, I guess it operated still in secret as it always does. Even in China, there's underground churches and whatnot, but I mean, who wants to do that? I mean, you're talking about true persecution. You're talking about going right back to you're talking about the Roman Empire again.
Although I think, isn't that the paradox? I mean, and none of us want it. I don't. But Tertullian, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. That actually, the church only thrives under persecution.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. It does. And I think part of that is because, until you know how good you had it, and lose it, you really don't know why it was worth striving for in the first place. I think that's what ends up happening.
And by the way, what kept the Russian church going wasn't the bishops and the priests, although there were many heroic bishops and priests that really were.
Yeah.
But it was the babushkas, it was the grandmas.
Yeah, it was.
The
matushkas.
Yeah, babushkas, matushkas, and secret baptisms and all of that.
Yep.
And I'm a big advocate, and people will curse me for saying this, but I'm a big advocate for, grandmothers of new babies whose parents are far too sophisticated to get them baptized because they want them to choose for themselves. I'm a big advocate for saying you can do their bath one night.
Yeah. I have done. I mean, I probably shouldn't admit this publicly, but I don't give a shit.
Just us here.
It's just us in the world. But I've done that. I've had grandparents bring me their grandchildren and say my daughter won't, do anything about her, and I'm concerned. I'm worried. And I said, okay, well, we'll just keep it between us. The only problem you're going to run into is that if at some point, she needs this, certification, that she'd have to come back to the church, and then it could become a thing later on that, what do you mean? How do you have this document with this church or this record with this church?
Right.
Then it could be a problem down the road if she decides to act upon it. But I mean, personally, I think that's a minor issue compared to salvation. So,
I'd say 2 things on that. Yeah, I do assert that it is better to have an ordained minister of the church do the baptism. Yeah, but it's not essential.
It's not. Anybody can do it.
Anybody can do it. But also that I don't think St. Paul kept baptismal records.
No, No, I don't think he did.
And again, I'm not.
But then again, St. Paul.
Records, but you know,
I think the church back then though took your word for it. It doesn't take your word for it today.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to another location and become part of a new community, and they ask you if you're baptized, I think in St. Paul's day, all you had to do is say yes, and then you were in. Today, they're like, you prove it, otherwise you can't do anything.
Yeah.
You know,
Papers. Where's your papers?
It's become sort of again very technical. Even in Orthodoxy, they're technical about that. In fact, they might be worse than Orthodoxy in some ways about this. They don't even Roman Catholic baptisms are not generally accepted. It can be very problematic.
Although you could look at that the other way. It's actually it's a graceful attitude, because it means that if somebody comes to Orthodoxy, they can start again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can look at it.
You can look at it that way, and there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, other than the fact that I don't know. Does Orthodoxy do? Does Orthodoxy perform conditional baptisms, or I would assume they don't, because they probably see everything that's not an Orthodox baptism as invalid, wouldn't they? I
think it's on a case by case basis.
Is it?
And I think there are sometimes good reasons. Like I say, I think it's more often that the church. By an act of, or bishops by an act of grace say, we'll baptize you.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
You know, because you can be received two ways, through baptism or chrismation. Right.
Yes.
So it depends on your circumstances.
Your particular circumstances, yeah.
Yeah. So as Westerners, we see it as, they're judging our sacraments.
Yeah.
And actually, that isn't actually what's going on. What's going on is they're looking at the whole person and saying, what's right in this circumstance. And you know, I think there's wisdom in that.
I think so too. I don't disagree with it. Jamie, what do we have next?
Not seeing any more questions per se. There may have been one up thread here a little bit.
Any comments?
D Fleming, sorry D. Well, you put it in the comments so I can say it. You know, she said, I agree with what I said about the baptism thing.
Yeah.
So I was one of those idiots who didn't baptize their children. So my devout father-in-law baptized my kids in the bath. Good lad. So I think that's great. You know, by the way, my mother, I didn't know this until I was only a couple of years ago. My mum told me this. I can't believe I didn't know. But my grandma was an Irish Catholic, and her parents, you know, were certainly her mother was devout Irish Catholic, and my mum was baptized in the Roman Catholic Church in our hometown. I didn't know that. Because her grandmother just took her to church and said, baptize, like you described, just baptize this child. And of course, you know, I won't say the year because my mum wouldn't want me to, but let's say it was pre-Vatican II, and so they just got on with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nasabo is asking when and where the finished production is going to be. We don't know, huh?
We don't know. In fact, we're not even sure that this case would be the content they needed to complete the project. I know that one of the things that he is hoping to capture is a genuine demonic event. It doesn't necessarily have to be possession, although that would be ideal for what his intent was when he came to us initially. I think he probably thought that it was more common, or that these solemn exorcisms were happening all the time, and they're not. Most of the time, and I can't emphasize this enough. I can't stress this enough. Most of the time, the cases that come to us, and we get hundreds and upon hundreds upon hundreds. We get countless cases every week coming in. Almost always they are attributable to something else, not anything that would require a solemn exorcism. Minor exorcism, yes. In fact, minor exorcism is quite of a broad definition. In fact, you could honestly say this case. Okay, let's talk about the case that we just came back from. The 3 actions I took while I was there was a blessing of the house, which is just, that's the no-brainer part of this work, is that when you're going into somebody's home, if you're going to go there and they're having spiritual problems, you're going to bless the house no matter what. You always start there. I mean, that's like, let's get the environment conducive. It's kind of like clearing the air so that now things can happen. So that's always the first thing I do. Unless I walk through the door and then there's like all hell breaking loose,
which
has happened, and you've all seen that. If you watch Ghost Adventures, you've seen that. Yeah. So you know that does sometimes occur, and sometimes it's so severe you don't even get to the house blessing. Mm-hmm. But typically, we can calm it down enough that we can do it at the end. But I always like to start with the house blessing as long as things are normal. And the good thing of that is it helps to kind of assess how the environment changes. If there is something demonic there, the house blessing starts to bring it out. And that can be helpful to overall identification of the problem. So that's number one. Number two, what we did is bless the family with a solemn blessing. And it's actually called a solemn blessing of a sick person, or a solemn blessing of sick persons. You can do one that's specific to one individual, and there's a version of it that's for several people that are there. And so I did the one for several because this was a family of 4. And honestly, you might say, well, why a sick person? Because ultimately, spiritual illness is sickness. It's seen in the church in the same way. Even the sacrament of unction is there to heal both body, mind, heart, and spirit. It is part of the entire process. The sacraments are a holistic approach. And all of these blessings are sacramentals that are based upon this holistic approach. So, we're dealing with a family who's having spiritual problems. That's a type of spiritual sickness. So we use this prayer, and it's very, very effective, very powerful at helping in building grace and also kind of getting to the root of the issue as well. So we did that. And then the last thing we did was an office of the dead right there in their living room, the full thing with chanting and all. I'm sure it probably surprised some of them because they probably have never seen or heard anything like that before. All of you that watch the Mass on this channel every week, you hear it every time. You're probably sick of hearing it because it's so a bit repetitive. But the reality is a lot of people have never heard this or seen this or experienced this, and to have it happen in your living room, it really has an impact on you. It changes the vibration. The chanting definitely changes the energy in the room and brings in good things. And one of the things that we suspected in this environment was that it was very much a disturbed location. I don't want to go into too much detail. You need to watch the documentary so that I don't spoil it for you. But it was a very spiritually charged location with a lot of unrested spirits in proximity to this property or even on the property. So doing an office of the dead was, again, a no-brainer. Pray for the dead. Pray to help move some of these people on so that it can quiet back down. And all of those things, when they're not handled properly, will appear to be malevolent. And of course, a spiritually minded person is going to think it's demons or it's going to be the devil or something, when in reality, it's just a lot of torment and trauma personified into a sort of archetype that is interactable. And it's like
the devil's far too busy running the country.
Yeah, he doesn't have time. He's too busy with politics. He has time for these little minor cases.
Doesn't need it.
So that's an example of a very typical case. This case that we just came back from is a typical case.
I don't know about you. Sorry to interrupt, but I don't know about you, Bishop. But most of the people that contact you, and I think this is perfect. This is the ordinary working of the Holy Spirit. Most of the people that contact you want to make some kind of connection. They might be notwithstanding. I'm not suggesting that they're lying about things they're experiencing. I think I treat people as though they have integrity unless they prove otherwise. But right. But most people are actually looking for a connection. Like most of the calls are about a basic. They've had no catechism at all because most people aren't anymore in the West because the church has ceased to have its central role that it once had.
Right.
And so they're really seeking discipleship. And so really most of the time you spend your time going, oh, what you want is to become a Christian.
This was this last case was a pastoral situation, did not require an exorcist at all. Unfortunately, the reality is a lot of pastors aren't doing their pastoral duty. So it takes someone like me with high visibility on TV and the awesomeness of what is perceived in pop culture as the exorcist's power to actually reach people and connect with them so that they understand that, hey, here's a pastor who's going to listen to you and cares for you. If that's what it takes, then so be it. And I have to remind myself of that a lot because, sometimes you get called into cases that are so trivial. And you really do a lot of prep work, and there's a lot of planning, and there's a lot of people have to take time out of their jobs, and it's a big process to go on a case and so sometimes when a case is very trivial, you get there and it's almost a little like you called me in for this. And it's like losing your keys and calling the CIA. I need you to help me find my keys. It's like, the CIA is going to laugh it off. But I mean, let's say that you told them that there was something really wrong, and then they came here, and then you're like, oh, by the way, it was just because I've lost my keys. You might get arrested for that. I have to remind myself that even though it's frustrating sometimes, there's never, it's never a waste, because there's always a pastoral situation that you have access to. And like you just said, Father, so perfectly, everyone's just looking for a connection. And if that's what we're here to do, and this is the vehicle through which that occurs, who am I to complain about it? Okay, it might be not the best use of my skill.
You're planting seeds too that may bear fruit later.
And that's how I have to remind myself that sometimes.
But moreover, is that, our primary vocation is baptism.
Yes.
Okay? And so we go there. I mean, in our case, it's kind of complicated by the fact that we're priests and exorcists, because we're also brothers,
yes.
And so the primary vocation to fellowship, to koinonia, to solidarity with as the community of Christ is through baptism, and that. So in a sense, it is like the CIA being called because you lost your keys, but at the same time, it's not the same, because then you go, you need a brother in Christ, and that's also my vocation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it would be like the equivalent of the CIA being like, well, it's okay, let me help you find your keys.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Did you check the
fridge? Which, by the way, a wise agent would do that.
I would think so. I mean, I would hope so. But that's what it's like.
But God's agents must always do that.
Must always do that. And I have to remind myself that a lot of times, even though it doesn't always feel, like it is the best use of this ministry's time, it always is ultimately, because the pastoral opportunity is really what it's all about anyway. And isn't it a blessing that you don't have to remove some demon that's this major barrier, that you can actually just connect right now, be like, hey, look, it's not this, all you need to do is that, and it's it becomes a lot easier. Of course, it's always difficult when it's spiritual apathy involved, but hopefully that there's something that you can say that helps them to move beyond their apathy.
Archbishop Fulton Sheen used to talk about wasting your life. Like, there's a great YouTube video of him, developing this, but you should look it up, people watching. But, that's actually, we're called to waste our lives doing God's work. and so, and it's much, that's why it's so liberating to realize your life is not your own.
Yes.
Again, going back to what Not Sure is wrestling with, that actually your life is God's. You belong to God. And God loves